Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has criticized the latest Indian government's attempt to illegally change the demography of occupied Kashmir. He was referring to a new domicile rule which allows permanent residence to those living in disputed territory for at least 15 years. In a series of tweets, the Prime Minister urged the international community to intervene and stop India's violations of the UN Security Council resolutions. He said Pakistan will continue to expose India's state terrorism and its denial of Kashmiri's right to self-determination. Prior to India's 5th August move, the Kashmir Assembly was empowered to define a resident of the region. In the United Kingdom, the death toll from the coronavirus has surged to over 2,900 after it reported 569 more deaths in the past 24 hours. In a tweet, the health department confirms that there are nearly 34,000 confirmed coronavirus cases in the country. Coronavirus cases worldwide are close to reaching 1 million as the outbreak continues to hit the US and Europe especially hard. The virus has claimed over 47,000 lives globally. Spain has reported 950 more fatalities in the past 24 hours, raising its death toll to over 10,000. The virus has also ravaged Italy, France and Britain. The death toll from the pandemic in the US has gone above 5,000 with 884 new deaths. Iran has confirmed another 124 deaths, taking the toll to over 3,100 with more than 50,000 total infections. Saudi Arabia has imposed a 24-hour curfew in the holy cities of Mecca and Medina as part of efforts to contain the outbreak. The disease has infected more than 1,700 people in the kingdom and killed 16. There's a growing sense of unease around the world as the global death toll from the coronavirus continues to rise. Nearly 1 million people have been infected with over 47,000 people succumbing to the disease. But it is important to remember that over 202,000 people have also made full recoveries. This includes one Iraqi postgrad student. More in this report.
Iran reported its first case of the novel coronavirus on 19 February. Within a matter of days, the country had become a new epicenter for the virus. Taking note of the situation, Iraqi student Farah al-Awadi rushed back to her home city of Najaf, but she had already caught the virus by the time she returned.
I never thought that I would have coronavirus because I was taking things seriously and following all the precautions. I waited 24 hours for my test results to come out. When the hospital called me, they did not say that I had tested positive and should come quickly. They said that they wanted to run the test a second time. This is when I knew that I was infected with COVID-19.
Luckily, Farah was able to make a full recovery after just 11 days in isolation. She was even able to continue taking her classes during this period.
I didn't feel lonely at all. My phone was ringing all the time. My family and friends were calling me. We would make video calls as well. So I didn't feel lonely, even though I couldn't leave the room. I was leading a normal life. I had my laptop with me and I could study since we were giving online courses.
For most people infected with the coronavirus, this is what the experience will be like. And while the virus does pose a greater threat to older individuals, being infected isn't a death sentence for them either. Even Charles, the Prince of Wales, was able to make a full recovery at the age of 71.
Having recently gone through the process of contracting this coronavirus, luckily with relatively mild symptoms, I now find myself on the other side of the illness, but still in no less a state of social distance and general isolation.
Despite this, the coronavirus pandemic is still capable of overwhelming health systems worldwide. As such, social distancing remains an indispensable tool in the war on the virus.
In a related development, Pakistan and the European Union have agreed to evolve a joint strategy to tackle the coronavirus pandemic by promoting mutual cooperation. In a telephonic conversation with EU Foreign Affairs Chief Joseph Borrell, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi appreciated the bloc's efforts to formulate a coordinated response. He also highlighted the shortage of essential medicine in occupied Kashmir due to India's lockdown, which has been in place since 5th of August. Qureshi expressed hope that the EU would support Pakistan's proposal in restructuring loans for developing countries to help them tackle the pandemic. Borrell said the rescheduling of developing countries' debt payments is high on the EU's agenda. Pakistan has reported nearly 2,400 infections so far across the country, with 33 deaths and 107 recoveries. The government has extended the lockdown till 14th April. Health authorities in 4 Arab countries have confirmed new cases and deaths from the novel coronavirus. The Moroccan Health Ministry said 22 coronavirus infections were confirmed, bringing the country's total infections to 676 in addition to 39 deaths. In Oman, health authorities said 21 new cases were added to the country's COVID-19 infections, raising the total to 231. Yesterday, Oman's first fatality from the virus was reported. In Lebanon, total infections jumped to 494, along with 16 fatalities related to the virus. Palestinian Health Ministry said 21 coronavirus infections were recorded, bringing the total cases in the country to 155. It said the 21 new cases are Palestinian workers in Israeli settlements and those who came in contact with them. As the novel coronavirus puts the pressure on hospitals worldwide, doctors everywhere are demanding better personal protective equipment. One hospital on the front lines of the pandemic in Italy has turned to 6 robots for help. Apart from being impervious to infection, these machines can also share the workload with exhausted medical staff. More in this report.
The Circoli Hospital in the town of Varese is located just 60 kilometers north of Milan. For weeks, it has been buried under a tide of incoming COVID-19 patients in one of the regions most hard hit by the coronavirus anywhere in the world. Like in healthcare facilities in the US and India, doctors at the Circoli Hospital also face a dearth of personal protective equipment. They have now turned to more high-tech solutions for their problem.
The idea was born when we thought about the risk of infection and we saw the situation of isolation of our patients. To avoid the risk of infection without increasing the risk of the patient, we thought the robot could be a good idea to take care of our patient.
Unlike the human doctors, these robots can linger in infectious wards indefinitely. This allows doctors to help patients while also minimizing contact with them. Most importantly, it significantly reduces the use of PPE kits, giving doctors another layer of protection.
Bene, messaggio inviato.
The other advantage for the patient and medical staff is also from the point of view of the organization of the hospital. It allows us to use less protective clothing like masks and overall, which at this time are in scarce supply. The advantage is therefore double.
In Lombardy, at least 2 hospitals have become vehicles of contamination, with patients infecting medical staff who then spread the coronavirus in their communities before the imposition of a lockdown. The COVID-19 death toll in Italy has now crossed 13,000. This includes at least 60 doctors.
In Afghanistan, the government has decided to release 100 Taliban prisoners in exchange for 20 Afghan soldiers as soon as this week. An Afghan official said the names of those to be released have been sent to prison authorities. The Taliban say the exchange will happen either tomorrow or the day after. And this comes after the two sides held a meeting in Kabul to discuss the technicalities of the process yesterday. The prisoner swap is part of confidence-building measures crucial for the success of the Doha peace agreement and ending nearly 2 decades of war. Both the sides are required to release almost 6,000 prisoners under the Doha peace deal. Meanwhile, the U.S. has announced $7.1 million to support its ongoing drones operation with Afghan forces. Pentagon's reinforcement has been announced amidst military withdrawal and approaching intra-Afghan peace talks. In a statement, Pentagon said a Washington-based in situ company has been awarded the contract for the operations. The statement said 95% of the work will be performed in Afghanistan and 5% in Washington. It said this order procures field service representatives and instructors to provide technical services in Afghanistan. The department said this program needed to sustain drones in Afghanistan in support of the Afghan government. Moving on, Iran says it only acts in self-defense after U.S. President Donald Trump warned it against attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, unlike Washington, Tehran has friends, not proxies. The Foreign Minister also accused Washington of spreading lies and cheating. This comes after Trump said Iran or its proxies are planning to target U.S. assets in Iraq. Tensions between the two countries flared up after the U.S. deployed Patriot air defense missiles in Iraq earlier this week. Iran responded angrily to the U.S. move, warning that Washington is leading the Middle East to disaster in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Turkey says it has killed 14 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry says the fighters were killed during Operation Euphrates Shield in the region. The ministry said it will not stop the operations against the militants in the region. Tensions have escalated in the region since Kurdish militants killed 2 Turkish troops last week. Since 2016, Turkey has launched a trio of operations across its border into northern Syria. Ankara holds the fighters responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. Syria says Turkey-backed rebels are violating the IDLIB ceasefire agreement between Ankara and Moscow. State media said the rebels fired several rocket shells on Sarakabe city and northwestern IDLIB countryside. It said the rebel forces fired artillery shells from Al-Mastuma town. State media said the rebels have reached the cessation of hostilities agreement several times since it came into effect on 6th of February. Last month, Turkey and Russia reached a ceasefire agreement and agreed to start joint patrolling on a key border highway. Ankara and Damascus exchanged multiple blows before that, killing hundreds on either side. A Palestinian youth has succumbed to his injuries inflicted by Israeli troops last month in the occupied West Bank. Palestine's health ministry said the victim was hit in the head with a rubber-coated bullet. On March 11, Israeli forces opened fire on hundreds of people protesting against encroaching settlers at Mount Al-Arma. The fighting killed a 15-year-old Palestinian, while 112 others were wounded. Israel's military claims that it was responding to 500 Palestinians burning tires and hurling stones at them. In Libya, 2 civilians have been killed in shelling by warlord Khalifa Haftar's forces in the capital Tripoli. In a statement, the UN-recognized government said the shelling damaged the houses in the vicinity of the Mitiga International Airport. The airport has been a regular target of Haftar's forces, who are also violating a humanitarian ceasefire implemented due to the coronavirus pandemic. Following the ceasefire accord, the forces attacked different locations in Tripoli. More than 1,000 people have been killed in the violence that was initiated by Haftar-backed forces last April. Guinea's President Alpha Conde's party has won more than 2/3 of the seats in legislative elections held on March the 22nd. Guinea's Electoral Commission says the main opposition party had boycotted the polls. The commission said Conde's ruling party, Rally of the Guinean People, won 79 of 114 National Assembly seats. The government also declared victory in a referendum held on the same day on the changing of the constitution. The opposition boycotted the referendum, saying President Alpha Conde will use it to seek a third mandate. The legislative elections were marred by violence, with scores of polling stations ransacked. The opposition has demanded a UN inquiry into the alleged police violence. The Polish government has decided to hold the presidential election in May, despite most European countries suspending electoral. Opposition parties say holding the election during coronavirus pandemic will be unfair, undemocratic, and potentially dangerous. Poland's President Andrzej Duda said if it is conducive to go to a shop, it is equally conducive to go to a polling station. Meanwhile, an online petition to postpone elections now has garnered over 270,000 signatures so far. Petition's author said the pressure will be mounted on the government to change the decision. On Tuesday, the ruling Law and Justice Party filed a draft legislation in the parliament for postal vote amendment to address opposition's concerns. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Over 5,000 European doctors have launched a drive to evacuate thousands of migrants in overcrowded camps in Greece amid coronavirus outbreak. Dutch doctors Steven van der Pfeiffer and San van der Koe, who had offered their services in the Moria camp, proposed the initiative SOS Moria. The initiative calls on the leaders of the European governments and of the European Union to immediately bring refugees to safety. Van der Pfeiffer warned thousands of people will die if the detention center is not evacuated. Over 20,000 refugees are living in the camp at the moment, which was designated to accommodate only 3,000. Meanwhile, German activists are collecting funds to airlift of refugees and migrants from the Greek islands to Berlin. European Medicine Agency has urged medics to cautiously use anti-malaria drugs to treat COVID-19 facing potential shortage. In a statement, EMA says hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine should only be used in clinical trials or in national emergency programs. EMA said despite early success in drug trials in China and France, their efficacy treating COVID-19 is yet to be shown in the studies. The US has already logged shortages of both the drugs, particularly after President Donald Trump termed hydroxychloroquine as a potential game changer. EU and US health officials have cautioned people against taking anti-malarial drugs to treat COVID-19 infection without a doctor's prescription and supervision. The European Court of Justice has ruled that Czech Republic, Hungary and Poland breached EU law by failing to relocate asylum seekers to their soil. The court said that these countries failed to comply with the temporary mechanism for the relocation of the applicants for international protection. It said those states cannot rely on their responsibilities concerning the maintenance of law and order and the safeguarding of internal security. In 2015, European ministers adopted a resolution on the temporary relocation of 120,000 asylum seekers from Greece and Italy to other EU member states. EU states were supposed to relocate a certain number of asylum seekers based on the given country's size and economic situation. Despite the compulsory nature of the decision, Hungary, Poland and the Czech Republic did not participate in the relocation program. NATO foreign ministers will meet virtually today to discuss the measures to counter the coronavirus pandemic. Speaking in Brussels, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the response to COVID-19 will top the meeting agenda. He said the meeting will address the measures NATO and allies are currently taking in the crisis. Stoltenberg said the ministers will also discuss using the bloc's military capabilities to contain the pandemic. He said the NATO's Disaster Relief Coordination Center requested to hold this meeting. A key UN climate summit in Glasgow, the COP26, has been postponed until next year due to the coronavirus pandemic. The announcement was made in a joint statement by the UK and the UN after a virtual meeting of the officials. The statement said the dates for a rescheduled conference in 2021 will be set out in due course following further discussion with the parties. Around 30,000 delegates, journalists and the environmental campaigners were due in Scotland for the meeting. Glasgow's Scottish Events Campus, which was due to host the talks, is now set to become a temporary hospital for the coronavirus patients. The United States has deployed its latest warplane, the F-35, to the Philippine Sea for a training exercise. Indo-Pacific Command said the stealth fighter jets were armed with GBU-49 laser-guided bombs. The command said the amphibious assault ship USS America is carrying the F-35s. The Pacific Marines did not specify the number of aircraft deployed for the routine training drill. This comes amid tensions between the US and China regarding international maritime navigation, especially in the South China Sea. Washington deems it its freedom of navigation in the region, while Beijing claims its right to impose restrictions over its waterways. Venezuela has severely criticized a US plan to double up military resources in the Caribbean. Earlier, Trump announced to beef up US military assets to deal with the growing threat of drug trafficking. President Nicolas Maduro said the US is trying to divert attention from its struggle with the novel coronavirus pandemic. Maduro said US President Donald Trump and his administration are trying to create an escalation, but they will fail. Venezuela's communication minister, Jorge Rodriguez, said Washington trying to divert attention from humanitarian crisis in the US.
The government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela forcefully rejects the statements made by Donald Trump, his Secretary of Defense, his Attorney General, and other officials of his security team in a desperate attempt to divert attention from the tragic humanitarian crisis that the country is experiencing as a result of the erratic management by its authorities regarding COVID-19. They intend to insult Venezuela with slander and threats.
Getting an education has been an increasingly difficult task for Syrian children since the country was plunged into a civil war 10 years ago. Now, the coronavirus pandemic has complicated things further as people fleeing violence struggle to find ways to self-isolate in jam-packed refugee camps. Some determined teachers have turned to WhatsApp to keep their classes going. More in this report.
For children in war zones, the disruption of school is usually the first indication that something has gone terribly wrong in their country. Volunteers had tried to restore some semblance of normalcy for the children of northwestern Syria by setting up schools in tents. But these can no longer continue amid the global coronavirus pandemic, which has now made its way to this war-torn country. In an effort to keep classes going, volunteer teacher Ahmed Hadaja had turned to giving lessons via WhatsApp.
Coronavirus is dangerous, so we try to ban students from gatherings. We try to deliver the lesson in their own tent via WhatsApp groups. It is not an effective way to make the student understand his lessons, but at least it covers 70% of the lessons that were delivered in the tents in front of the students.
Working with 5 other teachers, Hadaja sends video lessons and homework to parents' phones for the children to work through. One father says the method isn't ideal, but it's better than nothing.
I can evaluate it by 70% as the boy is learning by 70%. But it is different when the teacher is working in front of the student at his school. Teachers initiated this initiative so that students continue their studies until this dangerous virus comes to an end.
Doctors fear the worst if the COVID-19 outbreak reaches northwestern Syria, the country's rebel bastion. Test kits have arrived in the area, but there are no confirmed cases yet. From Syria to Bangladesh, tens of millions of refugees in camps and makeshift settlements remain exposed to the coronavirus.
Scientists in Australia have begun testing 2 potential coronavirus vaccines in milestone lab trials. The World Health Organization has cleared the vaccines made by Oxford University and US company Inovio Pharmaceutical for animal testing. Australia's National Science Agency will assess if the vaccines will be safe for humans. China said it will also test a possible COVID-19 vaccine abroad to carry out large-scale trials. It said military scientists have been working on a vaccine and the results of the first-stage clinical trials will be announced later this month. Russia is also testing 8 existing and 22 newly developed drugs to determine whether they can combat the new coronavirus infection. Emmy and Grammy-winning musician and songwriter Adam Schlesinger has died in the U.S. after contracting the coronavirus. He was 52 years old. The deceased was known as a founding member of the 1990s pop rock band Fountains of Wayne. Schlesinger had been on a ventilator for several days in New York. He was nominated for 10 Emmys for writing comical songs for several shows and won 3. He was also nominated for an Academy Award for writing the title song for the 1996 movie That Thing You Do, written and directed by Tom Hanks. The UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs says the global economy could shrink about 1% in 2020 due to coronavirus pandemic. The body says world output can contract further if restrictions on economic activities extend to third quarter and fiscal responses fail to support the market. The report said revenue loss will result in a higher unemployment rate. It said a supply-side shock will be transformed into a wider demand-side shock for the economy. Meanwhile, Eurozone manufacturing economy contracted sharply in March. Economic activity in the US has returned to contraction territory in March with a negative trajectory. US President Donald Trump says Russia and Saudi Arabia should settle their feud over oil production, which has caused historically low prices. After negotiations between Russia and the other OPEC states failed, Riyadh started offering discounted oil to certain Western states. Oil prices have further plummeted to levels not seen in decades, with West Texas Intermediate selling it for $21.38 a barrel. Price of Brent crude has also fallen to $24.74 a barrel. President Trump said the U.S. does not want to lose its great oil companies.
So I think that Saudi Arabia, Russia, they're negotiating, they're talking, and I think they'll come up with something. I'm going to meet with the oil companies on Friday. I'm going to meet with independent oil producers also on Friday or Saturday, maybe Sunday. But we're having a lot of meetings on it. I think I know what to do to solve it. But if they're unable to solve it, then I think I know what to do to solve it.
The International Air Transport Association says the coronavirus pandemic caused global air passenger demand to plunge by 14% in February. The Global Aviation Association said this marks the steepest decline in traffic since the September 11 attacks in 2001. In a statement, IATA head Alexander D. Juniak said airlines were hit by a sledgehammer called COVID-19 in February. He said airlines are desperately trying to survive in the most difficult times imaginable. D. Juniak pointed out that the drop for carriers in Asia-Pacific region was 41%. In late March, the Global Aviation Association estimated lost revenue from the coronavirus will exceed $250 billion in 2020. It urged governments to offer immediate financial support to the industry. Wall Street stocks have risen in a volatile trading as oil prices jumped on hopes that Saudi Arabia and Russia will ease the pressure of the oil market. The surge in the markets outweighed the shock of weekly jobless claims, which soared past 6 million. Analysts say the U.S. labor market has never experienced such a disruption. Meanwhile, traders have been closely watching oil due to its influence over other financial markets. Increase in the shares of Chevron and ExxonMobil lifted the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index. The S&P 500 was led by over a 5% rally in the energy sector. The Nasdaq Composite also traded nearly. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.